but also Florida, and actually Alt is going to be in Atlanta next weekend doing some series of lectures as well. But Alex is also one of the directors of the Spiritist Federation of Florida. He's our treasurer, heavy treasurer. So at this time, we'd like to invite him to talk about the Laboratory of the Invisible World.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank for the Spiritist Federation of Florida in giving me the opportunity to come over here today. Because every time that we come and every time that we had an opportunity to do something like that, we have the opportunity to study, to learn, to try to bring those knowledges into our lives and to try to become better persons. So every time that we have an opportunity to do something like that, it's an opportunity for us also to study and to grow. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for trusting on us to doing that. I think that I have a pretty challenging situation right now because coming right after Luis Lima, someone that can translate science into plain English, it's something quite difficult. It's a challenge for anyone that comes behind him. So as I don't speak plain English when I talk about science, instead of giving all this talk to you guys, I'm going to invite you for a walk in the beach, a walk in the park, which would be a very good idea for this wonderful Saturday that we have today. But instead of that, no, let's take a walk under the laboratory. Let's take a walk and see what happens with all these Spiritist manifestations. How can we explain? How can we understand better when we are talking about matters, showings, visions, material aspects of these Spiritist manifestations? All of these is based on the second part of the Medium's book, where we study and where we analyze the Spiritist manifestations. And in this part of the book, there is a chapter that is called The Spontaneous Formation of Tangible Objects. On this part of the book, Allan Kardec analyzes and asks questions about the fact that someone was describing to him a vision that that person has, or that person had, with a discarnated spirit. And when this spirit showed up to her, he was all dressed up with his hat, with his cane, with a snuff box, something which are very material and tangible objects. So Allan Kardec decided to inquire the enlightened spirits to understand that. How can spirits show up to someone with those objects, which are clearly material objects? How this phenomena happens? What is behind all of that? So when we start to see this, the very first two questions that come up to our mind is, can the spirits create new objects? Can they manipulate matter? And if they can, how does it happen? Well, don't have to answer right now. We have the Q&A section coming on, and then we can try to answer that. But anyways, on the Spiritist book, question number 30, we have Allan Kardec asking, does matter consist of one or many elements? And the answer, very clear from the Spiritists, is one single primitive element. The bodies that you regard as simple are not true elements, but rather transformations of the primitive matter. And actually, Antoine Lavoisier, which is considered today one of the fathers of the modern chemistry, he used to say also that in nature, nothing is created, nothing is lost. Everything changes and is transformed. So Lavoisier was already have that principle, and he was explaining that in nature, we don't create anything. We just transform everything and all the matters that we have around us. And then Kardec, with his very inquisitive spirits, he asked also, is there an absolute void in any part of the universal space? Any void? And then the Spiritism answers, no, there is no void. What is a void for you is actually occupied by matter that cannot be detected by your sense or instruments. As we can see today, scientists are bringing to us the concept of the dark matter. something that we cannot detect with our instruments, but with the knowledge that they have, they can bring us the concept of the dark matter. That's what happens today. So as we have all of these principles, as we have this concept of one single element that forms everything in our minds, then I would like to bring you guys a new friend of ours, which will help us to understand much better all of these manifestations and all of these transformations of matter. This new friend of ours is this guy that I call fluid. And how does fluid looks like? Who is this guy? How can I identify him in the streets if I see him walking in the streets? How does it look like? Well, fluids looks like this, or something else, or a gas, or a water, or any other thing that we can try to see. Fluid is a concept that will help us to understand much better how these manifestations occur and how does it happen. On the science definition of fluids, we see that fluids in physics is a substance that continually deforms, flows, under an applied shear stress. Fluids are a subset of the phases of matter and include liquids, gases, and plasmas. Or fluid can also be defined as the non-solid form of matter. So it's everything which is manipulated, because everything that is solid, we cannot manipulate it and we cannot transform as easy like that. Everything that is fluid, it's a lot easier to apply a certain aspect and a certain amount of energy, transform and remodulate that form of matter, as we have on fluid. Fluids, as one of the properties that the fluids have, it's, for example, not resistant any deformation. It's the ability to flow, to move around a lot easier. So it's much easier to manipulate when the matter is on this state, in the state of fluid. Well, that's how science defines fluids. But how Spiritist defines it? Because we have this definition as well. In the Spiritist, only Spiritism, the fluid is the cosmic fluid, or the cosmic principle, is the irradiable and fundamental constituent of all matter. Every form of matter, as we know it, are only modifications of this basic element. So everything else that we have, everything that we see in the universe, not only on Earth, not only on the solar system, everything that we see on the universe, it's only a modification of this basic principle, of this only element that forms everything else that we see as we have. Well, as we can already understand a little bit about the fluids, now we can try to see, well, if we have those fluids, if I have these things going on, if the fluids is something that it's easy manipulated, so I can think that I can understand a little better how the modification of the properties of matter can help, because I already understood this concept of fluids, or I think and I hope that you guys had understood on this walk that we're going on the laboratory. So on this modification of the properties of matter, Allan Kardec asks for the Spiritist, on the Spiritist book. Is the same elementary matter susceptible of undergoing all possible modifications and acquiring all possible properties? And the answer is? And the answer is a big yes. Yes. And this is what you should understand when we say that everything is in everything. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and all the other elements we consider to be simple are only modifications of this one primitive substance. This principle explains the phenomenon, for example, which consists in using willpower to confer very different properties upon any given substances. Water, for example, that when we have the fluidification of the water during our meetings at the Spiritist Center, but the spirits apply a certain amount of energy on that water, and that water, it's transformed in a certain other substances that can become a medicine for our body or a medicine for our soul as well, give us tranquility and these other kinds of things. So that's one of the explanations, and that's one of the forms that we can understand this manipulation of the properties of the matters. That happens pretty much every day on our Spiritist center. And talking about water, water is I think that's it's a perfect example to understand how we can have the same matter or the same principle on different stages and being modified. Here we can have the water in these three states of the matter, as we know. We can have this in solid, in liquid, and in gas. But I can't drink gas or vapor to kill my thirst. If I try to take some gas, it's not going to help it because I'm going to still be thirsty. It's the same matter, it's the same thing on a different state, but it has a different property. I can apply water, for example, to my skin if I have some bruise. It's not going to help me to heal the bruise. I'll have to apply ice if I want to do that. It's exactly the same substance, but with a different property. So here we can understand the different properties of the matter and the modifications that we can go through this process. So if the properties can be, before we move forward, how can we do it? What is necessary to do these modifications on the matter? First, we got to have God's permission, or the spirits got to have the God's permission. No changes or significant change will be made without God's permission on this process. Second, we got to have the willpower to do it. And third, we got to know how to do it. We got to have the knowledge to manipulate all of this matter. It doesn't mean that we just, as soon as we discarnated, are we going to be able to manipulate all of these matters or all these fluids? Well, probably not, because we don't have all that knowledge just quite yet. We're going to have to study and to learn how to prepare and how to apply the energies and the modifications, properties that will be able to transform all of this. But yes, rather later on, we'll be able to do those modifications. So if the properties can be changed, that means that the spirits can create. What do you guys think? Wow, interesting. Why I'm asking that and why I'm bringing this over here? Because on this particular manifestation that the chapter is analyzing, the big question that comes is, are the clothes worn by the spirits something real? That's the point that Kardec wants to analyze. And then he starts to ask and to inquire questions for the enlightened spirits. And one of the questions is, your explanation, talking to the spirit, indicates that the spirits submit ethereal matter to the transformations they desire. Thus, for example, in the case of the snuff box, the spirit did not find it already made, but itself produced it when needed by an act of its will, and then unmade it in the same way. Is this the same procedure for all other objects, such as clothing, jewelry, and etc.? And the answers from the spirit is, but that's obvious. That's exactly how it happens. And on this process over here, we can see again, on this part of the Medium's book, we can see again the highly inquisitive and logical spirit and personality of Allan Kardec. He asked 19 questions, some of them twice with the different words, to draw this conclusion that we're going to see over here. So he's not just satisfied by the first answer that he gets. He keeps asking questions to go into deeper and deeper on these analogies and analysis, so he can bring up all the information and all the explanations that we need to understand the entire process. So on this spiritual clothing thing over here, which is the point of our study by now, which are the conclusions that he came up? The spirits acts upon matter. As we saw, they have the capability. It's a lot easier to act on the fluid stage of matters, but they can do it. It draws from the universal cosmic matter the elements required to form the objects. Because remember, we have just one primitive element on the entire universe. And as we learn to work on that primitive element, we could be manipulating pretty much all of these matters if we have the will, if we have the capability, and these kind of things. This faculty is inherent to the nature of the spirit, of course. To create great things or great objects, we gotta know how to do it, and we gotta have the willpower and the moral value also to be manipulating these on the purpose that we want. So everything that we produce is related to our moral values and the capabilities that we create to ourselves based on our moral values as well. The clothes and objects formed are temporary. They will disappear and they will return to this kind of dark matter or explanation, or for the cosmic, universal cosmic fluid, as we saw a little before. And this procedure must be regarded as one of formation and not creation, because the only one that creates is God. We do not create anything else based on something that is already exists. The only primitive substance that we have is the cosmic fluid universal, and that we can manipulate it, but we cannot create that fluid. But applying the certain amount of energy on this, we can manipulate and then form other things. Well, as we move forward, this procedure must be regarded as one of the formation and not creation, exactly as we can see on those pictures over here. Please, it's kind of complicated to understand these pictures, but these are pretty much the only ones available and left after this experiment. We have over here Sir William Crookes, this guy over here, which for years and years was trying to study and understand the process of the apparition, of the materialization of the spirit of Katie King. He starts to understand, he starts to study these manifestations for a long time, and he had a lot of encounters and everything. That was late 1800s, 1890s, something like that, where the photography was not so developed as we have today. And a lot of this material and a lot of this research was lost during the World War II. So there was just a few pictures left proving those manifestations and those apparitions. Over here we can see the spirit of Katie King, what she was using and manipulating the fluids from the medium, the energy from the medium, to become or to make herself visible for the audience. So here we can see this spirit manifestation manipulating something to show or to show up as themselves as visible to everyone. So these pictures over here kind of prove everything that I was talking about. And it's very important to understand that she was very, very linked to the medium that was giving her the energy and the fluids and the ectoplasm to form those pictures. So if you guys want to understand a little bit further on that, I have more information that I can give after the talk and during the break. There is another books that we can also talk about, and there's a lot of information after that. So as we see over here, as we have this formation of the spirits, if the spirits can manipulate matter, if we can touch and transform that, they can feel matter and material needs on the same way as they were incarnated. How the spirit sensations and how is the spirit feelings for the spirits when they are discarnated? Well, they can manipulate matter. They are in touch with the matter. Do they feel the same way as they were incarnated? They can use the matter in the same way that they were incarnated? That's a very, very interesting question because it helps us to understand a lot about our spiritual life. And this answer over here, it's linked to the way that we live our lives on the spiritual world. Everything, and Luis Lima made this very, very clear, it's based on our moral values. As Luis said, the origin of our mediumship phenomena is on our thoughts. If you think good things, we'll be attracting to ourselves the good spirits, the ones which is going to help us on the manifestations, and we're going to bring the good information, the information that we are looking for, and they are going to be helpful. If we are linked to bad values or to the very low values yet, we're going to have the opposite results. Thank you so much. So over here, it happens exactly in the same way. So one of the questions that we have is, do spirits experience our physical needs and sufferings? And the answer from the spiritual world is, they know about them, for they have endured them, but they do not experience them materially as we do, because they are spirits. But that's the answer, let's put it this way. When we are already living on the spiritual world for some time, we readapt ourselves to the spiritual life. We are already used it for our spiritual life. But right after we pass away, right after we discarnate, these sensations and these feelings are not exactly like that. For a few days, for a few weeks, for a few months, or a few years, depending exactly on our moral values, the conducts that we have in our lives over here on earth, we can forget about those feelings as fast as we live under the moral laws that Jesus had proposed to us. So if we are good people, if we try to understand the moral values and concepts that Christ brought to us, and we try to do the best out of ourselves, after we pass away, we'll be helped by our spirits to readapt ourselves a lot faster on the spiritual world. So these sensations that we have, which is hunger, thirsty, the need for a bath, need for a shower, sleep, and these kind of things, we rapidly and fastly we're going to be leaving those sensations behind. But why do we carry those sensations? Why? As we are spirits now, we don't need the matter anymore. But we need to remember that our spirit was in touch with the matter for long and long years, for a long time. And for a long time, matter was transferring to our perispirit, and consequently to our spirit as well, these needs, these material needs that we had. So after we pass away, for a few days or a few weeks, if you were good enough, or for long years, if we let ourselves go into the umbral, which is in a state of mind rather than a place, we're going to be feeling those sensations, but they tend to disappear as we evolve ourselves. So it all depends on how we live our lives. Well, when a spirit says that it suffers, what is the nature of such suffering? Because in a lot of these mediumistic communications that we have on the messages, or even on the oral manifestations from the spirits, we hear a lot of them saying, "Oh, I'm suffering so much. Oh, I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling that, or I have pain over here, I have pain over there, or I feel so bad and everything." What is the nature of this suffering that the spirit says? Well, it's most, and it can be most related to a mental anguish, which tortures it more accurately than the physical suffering. It's kind of a sensation of remorse, regret. When we do something that we regret, almost immediately we feel bad about that sensation, and we keep that bad feeling inside of us. We have that mental anguish inside of us. That's how they interpret the sufferings that they have today. Is it possible for them to be suffering for a long time? It all depends how fast they want to adapt themselves and to transform themselves on the new spiritual lives that they have. We can be helped much faster if we allow the spirits to come to us, and if we allow to be helped. And how do we do that? When we connect ourselves with our Creator. When we think in God, when we pray, when we ask for the help that we need, we're going to be able to be helped. And those sufferings that we had on our new life, let's put it this way, when we go and we make our transition for the spiritual world, they will go away a lot faster. But there is no way to avoid all of this. We don't have to go through this transition process, adaptation process when we pass away, if we live now as we were supposed to. If we start to practice now, what are going to be asked for us in the future. And if we start to practice as of today, we can have much better communications, we can have much better mediumship links or linkage with the spiritual world. We can know, we understand much better the principles and the stages that we are going through. We'll be able to adapt ourselves when we go back to our spiritual life a lot faster, because we will know the concepts and we will know the consequences on what we are doing right now. So if you want to avoid this transition process, let's start as live as today as we were back on the spiritual world. We have that opportunity. We have that challenge in our minds. So to wrap up our conversation over here, as of now, let's come back to the conclusion. Let's try to answer those two questions that we made in the beginning of our talk. Can the spirits create new objects? Can they manipulate matter? And the answer is no. The spirits can't create anything. We don't have the power. We don't have that capability. But during the physical mediumship phenomena, yes, a spirit can manipulate matter to form clothes and objects to make himself visible, or even modify the properties of the original matter if they know how and if they have God's permission to do so. Okay? Hopefully that you guys came with me during this walk in the laboratory. If you guys need another walk later on, we can do that again and again and again. I'll be here for a couple of hours, so if you guys need it, I'll be here. Okay? Thank you so much.